I think it's increasingly difficult to work out what's gone wrong with the uh, Azhar Ali and the Graham Jones problem up in the north, with the by-elections starting today. The by-election for that particular constituency is in about a week's time, 2 weeks' time, and so the government's going to have a dreadful time today. Will it have a dreadful time because of the suspension of the Labour candidate for the by-election up there? I think the government might squeeze through, but I think it's more likely that Mr. Galloway will win instead of a certified Labour candidate. Now, what's going on here? It's about the failure of Labour to deal with the anti-Semitism problem, and the anti-Semitism problem is about confusing the language in condemning the Israeli government, condemning Israel, and condemning Jews, and that ends up being an anti-Semitic trope, a racist trope. And I think it showed up rather brilliantly by the event at the Paul Currie comedy gig in the Soho Theatre, where an Israeli theatre goer, a person called Eitan, was worried. At the end of the show, Paul Currie got out a Ukraine flag, got out a Palestinian flag, and manipulated a standing ovation. And almost everybody stood except for the Israeli man, Mr. Eitan, and he felt unsafe. He felt intimidated, and I thoroughly understand. The problem really is that it's is the language that is used is ambiguous and is abusive and is thoughtless, and this is something that I believe comes from sloganizing. So if you don't have a proper debate, if you don't follow the logic through, then you can't then you can't discuss something. If all you're looking for are keywords, tag words, which unfortunately is something that we're now teaching in schools, that you've got to have keywords in a paragraph in order to make the paragraph sensible. It's so that it can be marked quicker by some twit with a pencil. A paragraph should be read within its context, and a paragraph is an opportunity to enjoy an assembly of sentences that are structured to make a point. You don't need keywords there. A keyword is there to help people who don't really know what they're doing with a paragraph. And I'm afraid the same thing is true with the current Labour Party, but it's also true with the current Conservative Party. Keywords and slogans are taking us, are skewing us so far off reality. We are slaves to rhetoric. And the Israeli man in Soho was quite right when he said that he felt that the comic incited the crowd against him personally. Absolutely. More than that, the conversation targeted him personally. It was implicit and then it became explicit. And the debate between Graham Jones and Azhar Ali, or at least the bit of the debate we've got on tape, again, is about going from implicit to explicit. And so it may have been in part a debate about whether British people have a right to fight for another country. This idea, which has been discussed in the past about mercenary activity, and the loyalty of people to another state, and of course people who may have dual nationality, and people who may have allegiance to another state. And it's a very complex scenario. I very much remember the actor Topol when I was very small. Maybe I don't remember it exactly. Maybe I just remember being told about it. The actor Topol going to fight in the war, suspending productions of Fiddler on the Roof in order for him to go back. And no eyebrows were raised there. In fact, people applauded his decision. It's the same decision. The problem here is that the war in Gaza is questionable. So we might say, if you liked the war, would you approve? Spanish Civil War comes to mind. And Orwell, and all those individuals who went to support, and of course the Prime of Miss Jean Brodie, where somebody goes off to support and ends up on the wrong side. But ideology is not helped by foolish rhetoric, by posters of people holding placards saying no ceasefire, no vote, and all that sort of rubbish. Nothing is quite so simple. And throwing in anger as if that means conviction. Anger and bad language just means anger and bad language. So epithets about Israel, just bad language, and it gets you nowhere. I've made it very clear, I think, that while I support Israel, I don't support the current government in Israel. I don't support the current land invasion in any way. I think it's wrong. That's not to say that I think a land invasion was not inevitable. I think it was utterly inevitable. The moment the terrorist act took place on October the 7th, a land invasion of Gaza was inevitable. It was who was going to do it. And at that point, I think Netanyahu made exactly the wrong decision. I think also a period of time between the terrorist atrocity and the land invasion would have been of use, and the aerial bombardment of an entire people and the feet on the ground, leveling the ground of Gaza. This only breeds more ideologues. It only breeds more support for Hamas. I'll go into that in another video because I think there are a few things coming up today. But to start with, I think we just need to draw a line under this thing with Azhar Ali and Graham Jones. And is Labour right to suspend them? Yeah, Labour is right. Should have done it more immediately. Things are quite clear. Things are clear. And the problem is that people who have to take these decisions want to dither, but the issues are clear. Dithering isn't necessary. A line is crossed, and it's the same line that was crossed under Corbyn. The inability to tell the difference between an individual and a people, between an individual and a country, and that is racism. And that cannot and should never be tolerated.